hypothetical.
We're going to hypothetical.
We're going to number 2.
Yes.
All right. You should have in front of you something called Scenario 2. I'm not going to do Scenario 1 right now. And the name says Hector. So I'm a big believer in my own teaching and my casebook I wrote. It's always based on hypotheticals. I think as lawyers, we learn best when we're applying law to facts. So before we go into details on these forms of relief, let's have a story in our mind. So I'm going to summarize what you have in front of you. Hector's 17 years old. The median age of the children apprehended is 14. It's been dropping to around 11, but we certainly have a number of cases of children around Hector's age. He came from El Salvador, and he's living with his mother in Brooklyn. So Hector has been reunified with a mother. His mother was never married to his father. She had a brief relationship with him, and the father really abandoned the mother during the pregnancy. Hector, however, lived a long time alone in El Salvador because his mother came to the United States when he was only 9. He was left in the care of his maternal grandmother. He spent a lot of time with cousins, and they were out like brothers to him. The region where Hector comes from, in El Salvador, has grown increasingly violent. Gangs have infiltrated the schools and demanded la renta. That's a kind of extortion money. You know, like you might think of bullies and pocket change. This is usually much more severe, and demanding it from students several times a week. Students who didn't pay were beaten up. Teachers say they're helpless to stop this. Run home as fast as you can. One day last year, when Hector was at school, his grandmother came and told him he had to leave immediately. His cousin had been killed, 2 cousins actually, killed by gang members inside their home. One of the cousins had tried to defend himself and had in turn wounded a gang member. Those members vowed revenge and came to grandmother's house looking for Hector. Now you may say, well, why are they going after Hector if they're killing the cousins? This is part of the behavior of gangs. That family is seen as the most important unit in the society, and if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt one of yours. Maybe you can think of Romeo and Juliet. You know, we start with a battle between 2 men, and it soon is spreading to other people in the family. Grandmother gave all the money she had and told him it was no longer safe, and then he had to leave, and that he should go and live with his mother. All right, so he's here. He's in deportation proceedings. One of your first questions may be, is his mother with him at the court? Yes, she is. The immigration court in New York does not arrest parents who are undocumented appearing with their children. In fact, this child was released to his undocumented mother. That's because of a Supreme Court case called Reno v. Flores that says you cannot hold children hostage as a way to start enforcing deportation laws against the parents. Now, some of you politically may say that doesn't make a lot of sense. We should be deporting the parents as well. She's lived here undocumented for a long time. Even if you did begin proceedings against his mother, who's lived here almost, what it looks like 8 years, she would have defenses she could raise as well. There isn't really someone who's lived in the country a while. It's not that easy to deport someone quickly. Further, there are 11 million undocumented people living in the United States. The government's priority is not the removal of families and people who are not engaged in crime. The priority of the government, and they have deported, the Obama administration has deported more people than any other administration in the past, 3.3 million people. The priority is national security and those who've committed serious criminal offenses. Crazy slide, I know you can't read it. It's just to point out to you that contrary to what you may think, there's lots of remedies for people in immigration court, but most especially for children. If you can dig down into the details of the slide, you'll see there's something like the U visa that Joe mentioned. Someone might be a victim of a crime. They might qualify for some kind of legal visas through a relative. We're focusing on asylum and special immigrant juvenile status today. We want you to know that in our screenings, we have evaluated all these options. But certainly, as a case goes forward, if any important facts change, any facts change, just stay in touch with us. For example, one young man that we were representing was mugged, beaten, and all his property taken. He then went from being a potential asylum applicant to being a U visa candidate. And that was a better strategy in his case than pursuing the asylum case. Okay, so we talked, it says scenario 1, but we're doing scenario 2. Hector, I've introduced that. Let's talk about asylum. Again, thank you, Wendy Walagala, for this slide. We like its colors. Asylum is a nickname for international protection of people who meet the definition of refugee. You may have heard the United States brings approximately 50,000 refugees to our shores every year. And you may know that the UN has estimated there are 51 million displaced people around the world, some of whom might qualify as refugees under international law. When we're talking about asylum, we're talking about people who have reached our shores and either apprehended at an airport, a port of entry, or somewhere in our interior, or people who have voluntarily gone to the asylum office and seek protection. Asylum is divided. It's still meeting the definition of refugee. We call it asylum when you're applying inside the United States. You either have to have been a victim of past persecution or have a well-founded fear of persecution, but it must be on account of one of these protected grounds. You see race, religion, nationality, political opinion, particular social group. Race is a very complicated construct, and I just want to touch on here that many people in Guatemala do not consider themselves all to be of the same race. They would never say they were Hispanic. They might say you're Indio, or you're Mayan, or you're Quichen, or you're Blanco, I've heard said. Your ethnic heritage, where you derived from, who your ancestors were, the color of your skin may be a racial determination in your country. Religion, many of you may think it's monotheist religion there. It's just Catholic. Absolutely not. There's growing movements of Protestantism. The Mormon Church is there. I don't know how many Jewish people are there, but I'm sure we could find them. Religion is also not uniform in and of itself, even within the Catholic Church. Nationality, there are subgroups that are considered not full nationals of Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. We'll talk about political opinion and particular social group more in depth. This slide is taking the statutory definition of refugee and breaking it down into elements. Number one, you may not know this, but you can't apply for asylum unless you're outside, or refugee protection, unless you're outside your own country of origin. After the surge of children arriving began to draw attention in the media, some of our politicians said, we should let these children apply for protection in country. There's 2 times in the United States where we've allowed that to happen, once with the former Soviet Union for the refusnik Jews, for the Orthodox Christians. We allowed them to apply inside of Russia. That was a special statutory amendment done by the now deceased Senator Lautenberg. We also did this with Haiti in the early 1990s after the first political coup deposing Aristide. This may come about, but for the young people that we're talking about at the immigration court, they're already outside their country, so they do indeed meet the definition of asylum. You can't go to a U.S. embassy, knock on the door, and say, I'd like asylum, please. It doesn't work that way. So maybe you've seen it in films or movies or thought that's the way the law works. It doesn't. In fact, international law pretty much assumes people are going to, by hook or by crook, find their ways into another country and then seek protection. Children from Central America are not just coming to the United States. There is increase in applications for protection in Costa Rica, in Nicaragua, in Brazil, in Colombia, in Argentina, and in Mexico. We are not the only nation where these children are seeking protection. Refugee is not specially defined for a child. We cite here to the UN High Commission on Refugees, UNHCR, 2009 guidelines. That's exactly what they are. They're guidelines. They are used in training our asylum officers and our immigration judges, but they are not binding legal authority. These materials that we cite throughout the slideshow can be found in a Dropbox through our website. It's safepassageproject.org. That's all one word, Safe Passage Project. There are other safe passages out there, so you need Safe Passage Project. But some of you may be looking for a regulatory definition of how should a child qualify for asylum. This is about as close as you're going to get in terms of a narrative of agency guidelines. All right, Claire, you want to take over at this point about discussing the claim of the child?